Hi everybody, welcome to Men on the Main Line. I'm Elbra Jones and I've got a question for you. Are you part of the sandwich generation? You might be trying to become financially independent, but you face challenges. One may be that you, like about 47% of adults in their 40s and 50s, are raising a young child or financially supporting a grown child, or doing what our show today will focus on, which is you have a parent age 65 or older for whom you are a key care provider. You're sandwiched between caring for your parents and caring for your kids. If this describes you, I've got someone here today who's made a career of helping those sons and daughter caregivers. I want to welcome Dr. Melissa O'Connor. Dr. O'Connor has her PhD from UPenn, her MBA from Eastern. She's worked at getting her BSN at Thomas Jefferson. She's got diplomas from Lackinaw. She's super credentialed and so knowledgeable and really dedicated to this career. I want you all to welcome her, and I am grateful to have you here. Thanks so much for coming to talk about this topic. I really appreciate it. We're going to touch on a number of things. We're not going to get to everything that we could touch on, but we want to ask about caregiving sons in particular and how they're faring in these times. Sometimes the tasks that they have to do to take care of their parents are ones that they need help accomplishing. And so I want to find out from you first, though, since there are a lot of people who do this because they've been thrown into the situation, and others who are doing this because it's their profession. They've been called to do it almost. What's your perspective, and what do you do, and why do you love your career in this field?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here. It is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I am a professor of nursing at Villanova, and I'm also a nurse scientist. So that means I teach nursing to the next generation of nurses. I design and conduct research studies that are designed to understand how to best care for older adults, particularly those in their home. So I was fortunate enough to pick nursing at a very young age. I was in high school, and I fell in love with the older adult population my first few years in nursing and never looked back. So I would choose it all over again.
You would? That's fantastic. Now, I want to jump in right away to find out about sons who have found themselves in this position. What are some stories about the challenges as well as the rewards of doing this? Can you think of a son who's managed to successfully become a caregiver and what might have helped him to do that? And then maybe somebody who's been more challenged and had greater difficulty actually being successful as a caregiving son.
Yeah, happy to do that. So there is a family that I'm thinking of right now, and they are a family of 3 sons who are caring for their dad in his home, and they have beautifully navigated that caregiving process, and they switch off. So they will come and live with their dad for the week and take care of him, take care of his grocery shopping, his meals, his socialization, which is incredibly important for older adults, particularly those that are living in the home, and really help to keep him at home and keep him safe. Now, not everyone has 2 brothers to hand off to, and they are extremely lucky, and they know they're very lucky. But they're starting to hit more challenges. Okay. And that is because their dad is advancing in age, and he's starting to experience some cognitive impairment. Okay. And he's starting to fall. So this is a trajectory that sometimes happens, especially for older adults that are well cared for in their home. They eventually start to decline. So
you've got the mental challenges, the decline there, and then the physical challenges that are accompanying that.
For sure. For sure. And keeping up the house. You know, that's something else that can be incredibly overwhelming. And keep in mind, these 3 sons have families of their own. Okay. And they work. So it's been really fantastic for me to be able to work with them in that capacity. And now they are trying to do right by their dad and honor his wishes. He does not want to leave his home. No. He would really prefer that they not hire someone to help them out. Okay. So it's often a fine line, between doing right by your parent, but also taking care of yourself. Yes. which is incredibly important.
Yes.
In a situation like this.
I appreciate all of that. I know that the idea of asking for help, whether you are the caregiver or the person who needs care, can be challenging. I know for men, asking for help can be challenging. But you talked about how in your experience, there is help available. And this area of gerontological nursing is a space that you know extremely well, and a space I imagine these caregivers and folks who need care can go to for help. But what is gerontological nursing?
So it is a specialty within the nursing field where we specialize in caring for the unique needs of older adults. So older adults are not just adults that are older. They actually have unique needs. It's a very specialized part of nursing. And we often include families and caregivers. Sometimes they're paid caregivers. Sometimes they're sons. Sometimes they're not. But we really have that focus on the entire picture, because if something were to happen to someone's caregiver, that is not going to be good for the older adult that we're caring for. So caregivers are extremely important to gerontological nurses in particular.
Awesome. Are sons stepping up nowadays to be caregivers? You know, often we stereotype daughters and sisters as being more maternal or more capable in this area than their brothers or men generally. And many women actually feel forced oftentimes to accept the role as caregiver by default. Are sons stepping up or stepping back to perpetuate that other idea? What are you seeing?
So males in general are absolutely stepping up. Years ago, 34% of all caregivers in this country were male. It's now 40%.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, has it been a stereotype that women or daughters have been the caregivers? Yes, it has, but that's really changing. And let me be very clear that sons are just as capable of being caregivers. I hope everybody hears me say that. Sons are absolutely just as capable. It really depends on the dynamics of the family, the situation at hand, the needs of the older adult, their own family, their desire. But absolutely, I see lots of males as caregivers that are doing an excellent job and rising to meet the challenges.
That's good to hear. In doing this work, I've heard different stories that have warmed my heart. I've heard a daughter who took in her mother, ended up writing a book with her about that experience. And it talked about them having a challenging relationship when the daughter was younger. Obviously, they both were younger. And this helped them bond. It actually improved their relationship and increased their understanding of one another. With sons who are becoming these caregivers or continuing to be caregivers, what are some of the rewards being reported by them and maybe even by the male nurses in your nursing programs that you supervise and run regarding getting into this field? What are some of the things we might be able to say to sons, men, that are rewards of doing this work and showing this care for their elder parents?
Yeah. So that heartwarming story that you shared is actually happens quite a bit. Because not everyone gets along with everyone, right? And that relationship is not automatically going to be fixed when someone needs a caregiver. So I would say the biggest reward is time. Time with your loved one, that not all of us get. You know, so that is invaluable. And there is quite a bit of healing that can go on, especially if there has been a bit of a tumultuous relationship between the child and the parent growing up. As I said, that does not go away, but often people gain a new understanding. And there's something very special about caring for a loved one in their home. Something very personal. And often these are our parents who taught us how to drive, taught us how to use a fork, you know, the most basic, fundamental things in our lives.
Early childhood.
And I hope people see it as an opportunity to help those that got them to where they are.
I love that perspective. I think that the idea that you're giving back to someone who already gave to you is a powerful one. And it makes the endeavor seem less of a burden and an opportunity more so, if you stop to think about it. Oftentimes these things come about pretty suddenly though, and so the time to think about the meaning of it or the potential meaning of it might not be there. It might not be the place everyone goes. It's oftentimes after you've had time to reflect after the crisis that you say, here's an opportunity. Here's something that could help us grow closer. But that said, I love the idea that people are finding it rewarding. And I want to bring it closer to home for a second if we can. I wondered if there was anything you could tell us about the geriatric community here on the main line, whether that's elders living alone at home or living with caregiving children. Some are residing in assisted living spaces like a nursing home or hospice facility. And here on the main line, we generally are stereotyped, and even some statistics are actually confirming. It's a middle class, upper middle class community. That said, the personal experience of caring for someone varies from family to family. But just what is the geriatric community like here on the main line, whether that's in terms of the nursing homes or in terms of people's personal homes?
Yeah, so we are really fortunate in this area and in the Philadelphia area in general.
Okay.
We have lots of options. And as you said, we have home health. We have in-home hospice care. We have facility-based hospice care, which also can be referred to as end of life. We have skilled nursing facilities and rehabilitation facilities, depending upon what the need is of the older adult. That's more of a functional status and rehabilitation aspect. We also have a lot of independent living and assisted living facilities. And these are places that not necessarily are covered by insurance. They are locations that older adults often elect to move to when they no longer want the home upkeep or they want a one floor dwelling.
Okay.
Things like that. So they typically would sell their home and then move into a place like that.
Interesting.
But we are extremely lucky to have so many choices and so many levels of care.
Yes.
In this area in general. We certainly have a lot of older adults that are still living alone. And maybe their caregiver is remote or, far and does everything they can. So yes, I agree with you that we're in more of a somewhat affluent area. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people that have needs.
Absolutely.
And there are resources available for them.
That's great to hear. And it's good to know, and it's good to be reminded of. There are some folks that heard I was going to be doing this show on Men on the Main Line and actually said, Sean, ask Dr. O'Connor this. And so I've got some of those questions, okay?
Okay.
One of the questions from a young man who's in his 40s had to do with self-care for himself. He realized he was getting stressed out. So what self-care tips do you have for guys who provide care to their parents?
Okay, so that's a great question. And I want to first highlight and point out that not only are caregivers currently in the United States 40% men, but 25% of them, not of the men, but of caregivers in general, are millennials. 75% of the millennials are still working. So I want to just preface what I have to say, that they perhaps not only have their own families, they have a loved one that they're trying to be an excellent caregiver to, and then they're also trying to hold employment. So with that said, it is a lot. With that said, I wanted to be sure that we all understand that and that I understand that. And that caregiving takes a lot of patience. And I often have families say, yeah, I don't have the patience. Yeah, I can't do that. It is a skill we can all learn.
Okay.
So that's a little tough love there for you.
Learn your patience.
Yes. And it's really important, particularly for men, because we know, as you've said earlier, that they tend to not reach out and ask for help. They tend to not say, I'm struggling. This is really, really difficult. So my first piece of advice is I'm so thrilled that this person did ask this question, because self-care is critically important. It reminds me very much of when you're on an airplane and they always say when the oxygen comes down, put your own mask on first.
Yes.
You have to put your own mask on first before you help someone else. Okay, so you're not going to do your loved one any good if you're not taking care of your own health. We know through research that caregivers often have more depression and have health problems compared to the population at large.
Interesting.
Because they don't take care of themselves. Okay, so that's really, really important. You're not doing your older adult parent, family member any good by not asking for help and taking care of yourself. And what does help look like?
Right.
It could look like, hey, could you come over so I can go out and have some fun today? Super important for them to have fun.
That's right.
And to have a break. It could look like, hey, could you start doing the grocery shopping for mom or dad for me?
So sharing those responsibilities with someone else.
One less thing for me to do. Mom has an appointment next week. Do you think you could take her?
I really appreciate you sharing that. I know that even among siblings that I know, the delegation of responsibility doesn't always happen. And in terms of there being distances between one sibling and the person who needs care and the other siblings, folks far away sometimes forget that the folks nearby are doing things repeatedly and regularly and might need that break. And so I'm gonna make sure the person who asked that question, who I know, gets that tip. Good. Now, another guy who's in his 30s said that if the brain and the body and the physical always don't necessarily match up, what can we do to help the older person who's experiencing this brain, body, physical disconnect see that we're trying to love them, we really care about them, we see this disconnect that they might not see, and we want them to accept themselves at this stage of life. We're not trying to baby them, but what do we say in order to communicate with our parent that we see that they're aging and we want to be supportive of them, and we want to say this to them in a way that's respectful, but this particular person definitely tried to say it and was getting resistance and didn't know how to approach this conversation. What would you say?
Yeah. So I think that is critically important, because especially for someone who does rise to the challenge and is a caregiver, clearly wants to be kind and do what their parent needs. And caregiving is difficult. It can be really difficult. So it sounds like this person who asked this question has a loved one who perhaps is starting to forget things or maybe have some cognitive impairment. It's really, really important, especially if an older adult has cognitive impairment, to, easier said than done, I want to acknowledge, but not get frustrated. Because that's really obvious. So redirect, rather than reminding someone, Mom, you just asked me that 5 minutes ago. Just redirect them and say, perhaps change the subject or answer them for the 10th time, for the 100th time. And
have
again,
that
I'm
patience.
saying, exactly. I'm not saying, because they're not doing it on purpose. They're not doing it. And that's something else that's really helpful to remember. That they're not doing it on purpose to be annoying or to bother you. They genuinely don't remember. Our bodies wear out.
You know, those of you in the profession know this better than us, because you understand there is a medical condition oftentimes that's causing this, and you understand anatomy and aging better than most. And what you're saying is acknowledge that they can't help it. They're not being deliberately belligerent.
Exactly.
They're being themselves, and so accept them as they are, maybe be in their world as opposed to trying to force them to think of things the way we think of them in the world. Well,
can I just add one other
something?
Thing?
Sure, please.
It's often very helpful to try to engage them in something else whether it be an activity or another conversation.
Okay.
Something that perhaps they may enjoy. I just want to make sure I add that in there rather than just think that's my only option. And there are lots of other things you can do, and there's tons of resources online. I just want to make sure that people know about it. And AARP in particular has fantastic videos on caregiving. It talks about how to work with someone who perhaps is starting to lose their memory, how to manage medications for someone else, how to transition someone from the hospital. I mean, it's so many wonderful topics, and they're all free and so well done. So I would just highly recommend that someone do a search.
I want to ask you something about the transition. This notion of moving an elder person from one place to another, especially someone with memory issues, has come up a couple of times in conversations I've had with folks. What is it about moving from one place to another that we need to keep in mind so that we make it a successful move, a comfortable move for the person who's being moved, meaning the elder, and the son who might be the caregiver? What is it about the transitions that you might want to make sure we knew?
So that's not surprising to me at all that people have asked you a lot about that. There is a entire movement, it's called a care transition, where nurse scientists have dedicated their entire careers to researching this. And we know that bad things can happen in that care transition. Sometimes it can be going from the ER to a hospital floor.
All right.
Sometimes it can be going home from a rehab, going from the rehab to home.
Okay.
And other times it's time that we have to move mom, perhaps from home to another location. And it can be very disorienting, very disruptive. We know that when there are new people in charge, things can get dropped. We're all human. We're all human. So it is critically important that they have an advocate, which is the caregiver.
Okay. Super
important. And to be aware that this is a tricky time. It's a tricky time. So it actually encourages me very much that your audience is experiencing this and is aware of it. Because most, if you're not aware, you can't do anything about it.
Exactly. In terms of this, one person told me about going to the second location first to sort of scout things out. But they were wondering, if you do that, are you then supposed to go tell the parent what to expect in the new place, or is it enough that the advocate knows what the new place is going to be like? What does scouting accomplish, and is that a, I don't know, requirement or strongly encouraged?
It's a great idea for the caregiver to assess the location that they're moving their loved one to. However, in my opinion, a next step that would be extremely helpful is to take the loved one there, the older adult there. Let them spend some time. Many places have that option. Perhaps they can go and have lunch, spend a day or two. It really helps them to get acclimated to that new environment.
I love that.
Yeah. So it could be really, really helpful. And it's very anxiety producing for the older adult, especially if they are experiencing some memory issues. It can be really kind of scary. Think about going to a new airport. You kind of don't know where things are because you're so used to your Philadelphia International. It's a little difficult to navigate. Well, imagine what it's like for the older adult who you're no longer in that environment that they could have been there for 10 years, 50 years.
Right. You're making me think about the idea that as children, we are used to our parents being our security blanket in other places, being the one we can lean on when we go somewhere new.
Right.
And having to be that person for them, it's a mindset adjustment. But it is helpful to hear what you're suggesting. Go there yourself, but also take the person there so that you're sort of a team as you're going through this. Another person asked about trying to get tips on how not to make their parent feel belittled, like they are putting them down, infantilizing them. And I wondered if you had any tips or thoughts related to that, how to be a partner with the parent and just what to do to avoid insulting their intelligence or dignity.
Right. So you really touched on something that happens all the time, Elle, and that is the change in roles. Because the caregiver is now sometimes in charge. And sometimes that's a welcome change and sometimes it's not. So you're both learning. The older adult is learning and you're learning a brand new role. And I would again come back to patience, but also watch body language, watch the size, because you're frustrated. Everything can be frustrating, right? Even your job, your work.
Yes.
Not just caring for someone. Eye rolling.
Oh boy. Okay.
Your parent will see that. They will see that. So, when you're in the thick of things, really watch your body language, watch your language. Be true to yourself and realize that when you're starting to get anxious or frustrated or aggravated, you need a break. And sometimes it's, okay, we're just going to do XYZ for a few minutes so I can just go and sit in a chair and not be so frustrated.
Maybe saying that out loud so that everyone knows this is what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Right.
And that you don't have ulterior motives or, emotions that you don't have.
Right. And provide reassurance to your parent or the older adult that I really want to be here. I want to be here for you at this time. And I choose to be a part of your life and part of this journey that you're in.
That's powerful.
Yeah. I mean, and how enriching that can be for you both.
Absolutely. Well, getting close to the end of the program, but I wanted to make sure I got in this question from a woman in her 50s who cares for her mother. And she asked, how do you approach the conversation about self-care and grooming and hygiene if your parent either has a physical challenge with washing up and or just a challenge with regard to habits and brushing your teeth and doing the things that we associated with our parents when they were at their best, and these things are starting to fall by the wayside a bit. How do you approach conversations about self-care and grooming and hygiene? Okay.
So I want to, before I answer that question, I just want to say kudos and thank you to all of the caregivers that are watching this program, because it can be a tough role to play. So I just wanted to encourage them to keep going and to seek resources. But in regards to this question, it really depends on your older adult and if they have cognitive impairment or not.
Okay.
It's often a conversation to say, perhaps maybe you're going out for the day or somebody's coming to visit, and maybe you want to say, well, let's get spruced up a little bit because their grandson is coming, or let's put on some lipstick, or let's brush our teeth. Sometimes if they are not cognitively impaired, it's a matter of putting the toothbrush or the hairbrush in front of them. Offering choices, perhaps. All right, so we should get cleaned up. Do you not feel like a shower today? Would you prefer maybe if we just do this in the chair? We all want choices. We all want to feel like we have that opportunity, that we are autonomous beings and that we can choose. So offer choices whenever you can. Easier said than done.
Right.
As well. But any little thing that perhaps maybe you have to say, we need to freshen you up a little bit.
Right.
Especially if someone's incontinent. You know, that because over time, or maybe we often see people, especially who live alone, don't perhaps wash their clothes as often as they should.
I've seen that.
And that's something that we might have to say, how about something else? While you've been wearing that, you must really like that. How about this one over here?
Given the choice, but also suggesting the change. Well, these are great tips. Melissa, I have to have you back at some point. Would you be willing to come back and talk more about this? Because I want to get more questions to you about the field today and what's going on in gerontological medicine today and gerontological nursing. I'm excited because I'm getting this word out of my mouth smoothly right now. But right now we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much, everybody. Please look at this 4 times so that you can get some of the tips that were offered by Dr. O'Connor. This is only the beginning of this conversation, though. I'm still L. Brud Jones. This is still Men on the Main Line, and I'm looking forward to seeing you the next time. I really appreciate that you have tuned in, and take care of yourself and your parents.